Hi guys, welcome back to Cashed Out Cars. This is another episode of 2Broke2Boosted, my $1,500 budget Turbo Miata build. Today we are finally getting into some of the fun stuff here, and as you can see I have my turbo manifold and I have my turbo, and today I'm going to be talking about why I made the choices that I did for this build. So to start out, let's look at the turbo manifold here. Now this is one that I'm sure you've all seen before. This is the old eBay special 1.6 liter Miata turbo manifold. It is a cast manifold, so this is the preferred type versus a lot of the welded tubular ones that you could get off eBay that are extremely prone to cracking. This one's supposed to be a lot tougher, so that's why I went with this. I spent $90 on this thing. I got it second hand, but it's a brand new manifold. And I think this is a pretty sweet option for this build because, like I said, it should be fairly durable. It's very inexpensive and it should do what we need it to do. So after that $90 for this manifold, that puts our total budget at $700 out of the $1,500 budget. So once again, we're still doing pretty good. I'm going to go over this manifold a little bit more in depth as this video goes on. But first I want to go over the turbo that I picked. So this turbo is an eBay turbo. It was a fairly inexpensive one at $140, and this is not the cheapest T3 turbo that you could get on eBay. So this manifold is a T3, which is generally a slightly bigger flange than what a lot of Miata guys use on their turbos, because in general T3 turbos are made for slightly bigger engines than a Miata. So anyway, I had to get something that would accommodate the T3 flange and also not be way oversized for my Miata, so I went with this turbo. Now this has a 0.48 AR exhaust housing and a 0.6 AR turbine housing. Now the smaller number for AR that you get for a turbine housing, in general the faster the turbo is going to spool, but also the less top end performance you're going to get. And on a car like this that's a 1.6 liter that I really want to be an enjoyable daily driver rather than a dyno queen or a straight line queen, I think this is a pretty good option, so it should spool relatively quick. The turbine wheel on this has a 64mm exducer, so that's still honestly a little bit bigger than what I was looking for this build, but it should be pretty good. So for a little bit of a comparison here, the super cheap T3 T4 combo turbo that you normally see on eBay for around $115 to $140 has a 76mm compressor wheel, and that is just, in my opinion, way too big for a Miata that you want to have usable power in. And you can make tons of power with it, don't get me wrong, but with a budget build like this where I don't want to do internals, I don't want to risk blowing up the whole car, I think something a little bit smaller like this is the good option. Now this turbo is only an oil-cooled turbo, it's not a water-cooled turbo, so I don't expect the performance to be great. It's also not a ball bearing turbo, it's literally just a journal bearing turbo, so it's basically the cheapest of the cheap. The spool's probably not going to be fantastic and the performance probably isn't going to be great, but for this project I think it's the pretty good option. I spent $140 on this turbo, which brings the total cost up to $840. And then I also had to get this internal wastegate kit because this turbo unfortunately doesn't come with the internal wastegate kit, so I had to buy it separately. That ran me $40, so the total budget is up to around $880. Also, if you're interested in learning about how an internal wastegate on a turbo works, I have another great video on my channel that goes over basically the engineering behind an internal wastegate and why we use them. So if you're interested in that, go check it out. Now let's get more into these turbo parts. Another reason why I got this specific turbo on eBay is it came with an oil feed line and it came with all the adapters that I need to hook up this oil feed to the turbo. It did not come with an oil return, which I think is kind of silly that they include the feed and not the return. But anyway, that's what we're working with. That's from eBay. I'll get a different oil return and fitting for the oil pan, and then we'll be well on our way there. So I want to keep going into this turbo stuff just a little bit. For comparison, a turbo that a lot of people usually use on Miatas, which is a bigger T25, T28 style flange, is the Disco Potato, which is the Garrett GT 2860R. and that turbo has a compressor exducer of 60 millimeters. So this is a 64, which is even a little bit bigger than that turbo, but that other turbo is a much better performing ball bearing turbo that's also water cooled. So like I said, I don't expect this thing to perform quite as well. The spool's not going to be fantastic on it, I don't think, but for this build, I think it's going to be awesome. Getting back into that other super inexpensive T3, T4 eBay turbo that I mentioned before, that turbo is sort of sized like the GT3076R from Garrett, which is supposed to make between 310 and 525 horsepower out of 2 liters to 3.5 liters. So that turbo is way oversized for a Miata like this, and like I said, if you want to have a fun, usable car, I would recommend looking at a smaller turbo versus one of the really big, cheap eBay ones. Obviously, that's up to you, and I haven't tested that other turbo, but based on everything I've researched and based on what I know from just engineering, this turbo is going to be better for this setup. So now I'm going to take a look at everything that I have on my bench here before we just assemble it on the bench so you could take a look at what it will look like. And I want to start out with this cast eBay manifold. The quality on it is not absolutely fantastic as you would expect from a $90 part. It's probably made of pure Chinesium and really isn't that high quality. But anyway, this is, like I said, I think the best option because of its price point and durability that I've read about it. Now inside the actual manifold is pretty rough. The casting is not very smooth, and I'm sure it won't flow absolutely great, but for what I want to do, I think this is the excellent option. Moving on to the turbo here, and I'll uncap this just so you can see the compressor wheel, because that's what everyone likes to see on their turbos. It's pretty small on this thing, and that, like I said, is what I wanted so I could get pretty quick spool. The casting on this turbo housing isn't fantastic, but it's decent enough for what it is, and it does feel like there's just a tiny bit of slop in the wheels already. But since this is not under pressure right now with oil, I think that's pretty normal, and it's not a lot of slop. It's just I can move the thing just a real tiny bit. It feels pretty tight, but once there's oil pressure running through it, I should have no problems with that. The wastegate kit here, like I said, just bolts right onto that, and with all that said, we could assemble some stuff right now so you could see how it looks, and then eventually I'm going to have another episode on getting this whole hot side onto the car. Now, you'll notice there's no downpipe here with everything that I have, and the reason for that is I'm going to be making a custom downpipe to save some money. I'm going to try to do a really cheap one that I MIG weld myself, and then I'm also going to have a better one made that's TIG welded to show you a couple different options. So first things first, let's bolt up this internal wastegate kit and see how this thing fits on there. I don't expect it to fit perfectly, and I think there's going to be a little bit of retrofitting that we need. Also, there is no gasket between the wastegate here and the actual turbo, which isn't my favorite thing. I feel like there should be one, but I don't know. I'm certainly not an expert here, and if you guys know why they wouldn't run a gasket between these two parts, definitely let me know. Alright, all the holes lined up, so that's a good start for an eBay part, and now I'm just going to tighten them down so I could get a better idea of how it'll sit. One thing that I'm realizing now is there's actually not enough room to get the socket over this bolt, so I'm going to have to use a wrench on that after. Alright, so let's test fit on there. I really don't like that there's no gasket at all in there, so I might take this back off and make one in a future video. But anyway, this is just going to be a test fit. So that's on there now. This wastegate doesn't really look like it's going to fit at all in any really good spot here. So that's going to be something else that I'm going to have to play with and probably make custom in a future video. Now we could go ahead and drop this onto the Holy Grail eBay manifold here, and I'm going to need to prop this up actually so it'll stay in place. Alright guys, so everything is loosely on there. I'm going to go, oh, wow, I'm an idiot guys. I put this thing on backwards. I got to take that off and just swap it around. Alright guys, behold about $270 worth of eBay turbo parts. This is going to be the muscle behind 2Broke2Boosted. Like I said, I don't have extremely high expectations for any of these parts, but I think it's going to be a really fun place to start, and from here we'll be able to upgrade stuff as it breaks, as I want just better performance, and in general, I'm pretty psyched for this. And so guys, with all that said, that's going to wrap up this episode of 2Broke2Boosted. In the next episode, we're going to be cleaning up a few of these parts and making the necessary modifications that they need in order to get them on the car and ready to go. And then from there, we're going to be mounting up the intercooler and eventually actually getting this thing all ready to drive. So if you like this video, don't forget to leave a like. If you want to see the next episode of 2Broke2Boosted right now, you could go ahead over to my Patreon account, and the next episode is live right now. I'm super excited with how this is going. I'm super excited to have the hot side pretty much assembled minus the downpipe, and I cannot wait to hit boost in 2Broke2Boosted. Hope to see you at the next one.